There are many colleges which do not have any permissions. They are not maintaining the standards, but they market it as if they have, and parents go and enroll their children in these sort of schools only to know 10 years later that the schools did not have any permissions.
So the certificates are only not real. You know, in education especially, there's almost that certainty that if I put in the hard work, the result will be there.
Today, it's become a complete rat race to get something as basic as education. And the entire thing is because your number of seats are so less than the number of applicants. Every student, if you see these rules of appearing for this competitive examination, it is hard even for a professional like me and you, because they are very complex rules. Even if you don't upload a particular document, by mistake, you cannot correct that mistake, you are out. In cases where you have students who want to go in competitive fields, you have medicine, you have architecture, you have engineering, you have IIT. So IIT and medicine are the two fields as of even today that are most sought for. So you will have the ratio of number of seats and the number of students applying. There is a vast difference. Very important in today's times that if you're signing any document, if I have to give one advice, please read.
There are so many forms you're signing blindly. Why doesn't the government actually pass a law about inheritance being divided between siblings? So Pooja, tell me, you've handled educational matters. Can you tell me legally a case where an institution was legally protected even when it was ethically wrong?
So I'll give you this very interesting case. A few years ago, there was a student who approached me because he had appeared for one of the most premium entrance exam in the country, which is called your pre-medical exam. It is called as a NEET exam that we know. Now, because this is such, say, suppose if there are 1,000 seats, you have 50,000 people appearing for it. So that is that competitive, just to give you an idea how competitive these exams are. And so one of the rules is that because you don't want people to cheat in exams, the question paper are in versions. So your version 1 to version 10. So everybody is sitting right next to each other will not have the same question paper. So how it happens is version 1 question paper, version 1 answer sheet. So that when you write it, you know it has to match. So this student, by the error of the examiner, was given the wrong version question paper and a wrong version answer sheet. So he starts raising alarm that you've given me a wrong paper, please change it, otherwise I won't be able to write. It takes him 2 hours to convince and get the supervisors, because he said, I will get 0. You have to. They give him the right version after 2 hours. So he basically got only 1/3 of the time to write his paper, which was no result that he did very poorly in his papers. So the minute he got his results, we filed a case saying that you need to compensate us. So the Bombay High Court passed a verdict that you have to do a re-exam. So this 1 or 2 students who had faced this problem, the board that conducts this examination goes to the Supreme Court challenging the Bombay High Court verdict, and the Supreme Court has actually given a verdict that we are sorry, we cannot do a retest. This is too much of a burden for doing the counseling, everything will get delayed, and it is an unfortunate case, but we can't help.
Tough luck, sort of.
Tough luck. So just imagine there is a student who's comes from a middle class, has meager means to pay for these classes, somehow prepares for an entrance exam, has no mistake, and the system doesn't get any relief. And the order also records that it is unfortunate that the student has to suffer, but we can't help. So in spite of the fact that Bombay High Court came to his aid, eventually the boy didn't get any justice.
But that's really sad because, in education especially, there's almost that certainty that if I put in the hard work, the result will be there.
Yeah.
Everything else in life, we're not certain.
Yeah.
I might start a business, might fail. I might apply for 20 jobs, not get one. I might try a lot of things in life and not. But like education is something that we're so certain, right? That if I work hard, I will get the numbers for it. If I study, I will pass the exams. I'll come first, I'll come second, I'll get a degree. So I think like education is almost the only kind of like, input equals output.
Yes.
And to be failed in that, I think would be like very heartbreaking.
I know, but you know what happens in a country where the population is so much, where your resources are meager, where your seats in premium institutions are 1% of what people actually need, then you have these kind of, imbalances, and the system is unable to correct it as of today. And that is the hard reality.
Yeah.
The hard reality of the resources that you have is this. This is the other fallout.
Parents often feel helpless against schools and universities, right? Because it's like power play. There's not much a parent can do when it comes to an institution. Can you narrate a case where a family felt intimidated into silence, and what actually happened behind the scenes?
Okay, this is going to be very interesting. Since the last 5 years, I am getting these students again for the pre-med exam, which is very commonly known as NEET exam. You must have heard in news all the time that NEET exams. This is called as the pre-medical entrance examination in the country. So I've seen this pattern. In the last 5 years, every year I will get these students, one or two, who will say, this is not the answer sheet I wrote. So if you see the answer sheet, this is a multiple choice question. So every question will have 4 options, and you just have to darken the spot. You don't have to tick. You just have to take a pencil and darken the spot.
Yeah, it's like color the bubble.
Right? It's
Yeah.
like color the bubble. So they are saying, this is not what I put. When we put our answers, every student is so competitive that they tick it in their question paper as well. So they said, I know the answer. I have not put this. This is not my answer sheet. So initially, we didn't want to believe students. When we saw that the pattern started increasing, we thought maybe there is something more than meets the eye. And then we ended up even filing for a few students, but we didn't get any relief because we couldn't prove it. Until I had 2 cases. Now, both the cases are very interesting. In one case, the student says, I went to appear for the examination, but the national board, which is who conducts the exam, the authority says that no, you were absent, and they're refusing to give me the CCTV camera recording.
That's crazy.
That's crazy, but the family was too scared to file a case. There is another example. So as per the procedure, your answer sheet is given to you on email. On her answer sheet, she gets, suppose, 90 on 100, and she sees it. After one day, her answer sheet is changed on the web portal, and now her marks have reduced to 40, now, which makes a lot of difference.
Correct.
I said, you have great proof. Let's go to the court. Now, nothing gets better than that. They said, okay, we'll take a day to think. And they said, no, you don't want to fight the system. We don't want to be, they didn't have the trust in system that we could go to court. They said, it's all right, we'll make our daughter appear again next year.
Just waste a year.
Just waste a year. In spite of having the proof that the system gave 2 mark sheets, rather 2 answer sheets, both having different, and has the signature, has the name, but the answer sheets are different. The answers are
This is
different.
happening because of the volume of applicants, or genuinely the
No.
system is flawed?
No, I think the system was very good. But in the last 5 years, we started receiving complaints. And then you remember last year, you had this big notice that more than average people, I think 17 people got highest full marks.
Yeah.
And then there was an inquiry.
Yeah.
So this was a pattern where, everybody started, it came under the national scrutiny that there is something wrong with this authority, that there has to be something that is going wrong, that you cannot have so many people getting full marks. So everything that we were saying in the last 5 years got proved that, oh, there is something amiss. Now, we were not able to pinpoint exactly what was that one system, that perhaps there is some sort of misdoings happening. But then, it was a national news that it needed a proper scrutiny to see what was going wrong.
It's very interesting because I don't think like everyone would know that lawyers are involved in education. Like people would not know that there's something called educational law and there are matters related to it. Honestly, like if I didn't need it, I wouldn't even think I like would know about it, right?
Yes.
And it's not like I've needed it, but like when you research and you read about it, you get to know, because it's something people think, like there's so much trust in institutions, there's so much trust in the education system, that you kind of feel like, I'm sure there's no lawyers and law involved in this. How did you get into it?
Okay, first let me tell you what education law entails and why it is called as education law. Honestly, it is a word just to plainly describe that somebody caters to a lot of education institutions or students. Now, a lot of trusts or bodies or companies want to get into the occupation of catering to education. So, you would want to open an education institutions right from your pre-primary to a professional courses. And the most interesting fact is that you have to follow rules. You have to follow certain standards. So, you just can't open for the sake of opening.
Yeah, there are
And
protocols
there are
involved.
protocols. The protocols also include that there will be systems to check whether you have the right kind of qualified teachers, whether you have infrastructure, whether you have
Paperwork in place.
paperwork in place, land in place, maintenance in place. It's not like that you have just opened a building, there is no infrastructure, there are no teachers, but you're
Running a school on its own.
running a school, taking fees, and just giving certificates. So, to ensure this, there was a lot of laws which were enacted. And to see whether it has been followed, hence comes where your education law, or in cases where you have students who want to go in competitive fields. You have medicine, you have architecture, you have engineering, you have IIT. So, IIT and medicine are the two fields as of even today that are most sought for.
Yeah.
So, you will have the ratio of number of seats and the number of students applying, there is a vast difference. So, every system is made of people, right? There will be some errors that go in filling the application forms,
Correct.
right? Then what do these students do? The students feel cheated that I worked hard, I did everything, yet I'm not getting admission. So then they want to come and knock the doors of the court, and the court really come to the aid of these students. And that's where your education law, begins. I got into it because I come from a chamber. I worked with my father, who happened to have his expertise in education law because he ended up appearing for a student once, and that became his expertise. And I started working with him, and it's sort of my expertise. But I also do a lot of challenge to public policies, including what I do in the field of education.
What's the one most common illegal practice that's happening across institutions that parents and the general public is not aware of, but you as a lawyer would know?
I think in my experience, what I have seen, one most common mistake that parents do, unfortunately, because there is no awareness, is that they end up admitting their children to schools or colleges which have zero recognition. So every parent wants, to work to ensure that their child is getting the best of education. So there is always, if you've seen the last 25 years or 50 years, you see that everybody is wanting to ensure that their child gets best education either in the country or overseas. So that you have seen a trend where the number of colleges are increasing.
Yeah.
Right? Why? Because there is a need for good quality education. Now, there are many colleges which do not have any permissions. They are not maintaining the standards, but they market it as if they have, and parents go and enroll their children in these sort of schools only to know 10 years later that these students did not have, the schools did not have any permissions.
So the certificates are only not real or
The
legal.
certificates are not legal. I'll give you a very good case. There is one institution which runs postgraduate medical courses. Okay, this medical institute was told way back in 2009 that you don't have the proper infrastructure, you don't have the proper recognition, so you should stop enrolling students to these 5 courses. What this institution does, the body which is supposed to give the authorization, it says now you stop admitting students. It goes to the state government, it takes permission from the state governments, increases its courses from 5 to 50.
Oh,
Okay, runs these courses saying that no, I am valid in the state because I have a permission with the state government. The state government did not even have the authority to give this recognition. Okay, we had to file a PIL. We filed this PIL. We've been fighting this case up until 2025. The courses are today in 2025 stopped. After the litigations were filed, the state government then withdraws the permission saying that we don't want to give permissions anymore. But this went on for how many years? Just imagine the number of doctors who passed from these institutions without having a recognized degree.
That's crazy.
And imagine the people who get treatment from doctors who are being trained where there are no infrastructure, no facilities, and you are getting degrees.
And it's not really a degree, right?
It's
It's not a
not.
legal degree.
It's not.
So you're being treated by a
recognized
doctor
degree.
who is actually not certified
Yes,
by the system.
by the system. Now, but imagine what is the mistake of that student? Again, this is the mistake that parents or students end up doing, that they are not aware of what the legalities are, what recognition is.
But then how will somebody actually know the legality, or how will somebody know that I'm enrolling? Because like you said, they're marketed so well that you would buy into it. You know, you would not sit and think like, oh, this institution might be fake or the certification is going to fake. Nobody
Yeah.
thinks that because
Yeah.
they're marketed so well. They advertise so well. They look so good on paper that you
Right.
would think that I'm going to get my degree. I'm not getting anywhere else in the, let's say, the government schools or the government colleges.
That's true.
Yeah, like the state universities. So I might as well apply to this private institution and I'll
Right.
get in.
Right.
So actually, like, it's nobody's fault, right? It's innocent violation, nothing else.
Right. And can you know the law can be like, there is a saying, law is an ass, because it cannot see between who is before, it has to be just. The way law is, if you are practicing with a wrong degree or unrecognized degree, you get punishments. Like you will have, your license will be revoked. There would be certain consumer, you could come under ambit of consumer cases, you could come under, your patients could sue you for treating them without a degree. But there were no consequence for education institutions running such degrees.
Oh, so it's just one-sided.
Yes. So
It's like I ate the bad apple and now
Yes.
I'm responsible for my health, but
Yes.
not the person selling it to me.
yes.
Wow.
So that was, but the hope is that the system will improve, which is where the ambit of why these PILs are so necessary,
Yeah.
and it's only by this PILs or the judiciary that you can effect actual change in society. That you-
Correct.
yeah.
Very interesting. So, if parents understood one legal right today, what could change the power or the dynamics completely? Can you tell us about that?
As a parent for their child's education, please write and create documents wherever necessary. Suppose you think that your child has been deprived of an admission or a process or counseling rounds, anything, write emails, write letters, make documents, because this will help if in case you want to approach an authority or if you want to approach the court, because every authority or court will ask you proof that if this happened, did you write to somebody? This is the documentation that we talk about. So a lot of times when we file cases in court, we need to show the documents that, this
Yeah.
happened, and I immediately
Immediately.
wrote to the authorities. So if I can tell parents, do your research when you admit your kids to school. See, you are living in the age of internet and AI.
Correct.
I mean, I'm more fan of internet than the AI, but you will get all these answers by a touch of a button today. You will know which authorities are supposed to be recognizing them, whether these colleges have the certification. And second, suppose for any reason you think that there has been some sort of injustice done to the student, write about it, so that you can use this documentation to get what you deserve.
Very interesting. I mean, I was not really aware of all of this. So it's very interesting to know that, people fall into these traps and innocent traps that are happening to so many students. And at that student level can be so discouraging. So when something, see, life is never going to be, like this. It's always going to be like this. So many things are going to happen that you feel like life is unfair, shouldn't have happened to me. Why did it happen to me? But I think as a student, you don't expect that you've put in a year of hard work and
Yes.
the exam has failed you, the institution has failed you, your mark sheet is wrong. I mean, these examples are kind of like mind-boggling to think. Do you think it only happens here, or do you think this happens worldwide?
No, it happens majorly in India, or let us say it happens majorly in developing countries. See, what happens is, if your number of seats and number of people, there is a balance, then the authorities will have a kinder look at it,
Yeah.
right?
And they have enough resources to look at that
You
work.
will have enough resources to look at that. Even if you have the resources, the number of seats are so less than the number of applicants. Every student, if you see these rules of appearing for these competitive examinations, it is hard even for a professional like me and you, because they are very complex rules. Even if you don't upload a particular document, by mistake, you cannot correct that mistake, you are out. Imagine, we've had students where the student has got full marks, but he's made a mistake of uploading the wrong document.
Gone.
Gone. He's been thrown out of the admission process, and they say you apply next year, which means again appear for the examination. This is a hard system. So, and that's where we help and we cater to these students and say, you know what, let us try. Then we appeal to the court. Let's see, he's a good student, and these are errors. And you will, more often than not, you will see the courts catering to the students and helping them out, that we understand, but let's see where we can help the student out.
Have you ever, Pooja, fought a case where a child or a student paid the price of an adult's ego or fear?
So I'll tell you this very interesting case. You know what is a night school?
Yeah.
A night school caters to students who want to do their primary education, or let's say secondary education up to 10th or 12th, who don't afford it. So who are these people? These are your laborers. These are people who are working in, as waiters or
House help.
house helps. So who work during the day, and at night they want to go to the school to get something as basic education as that. So we had a very good policy in the state government which said, who will be night teachers? So they allowed, okay, day teachers will get one salary for being a day teachers, but if you also want to work at night, we will give you half the pay, and you can also work in night schools. So it was good for teachers who wanted to make an extra income. Suddenly, overnight, one fine day, the state government says, we are going to stop this policy. Day teachers cannot work at night. We have certain surplus teachers who will only go and work in night schools. Now, because the implementation of this law was so poor, that they literally send Gujarati medium teachers to teach Marathi medium students. They sent a science teacher to teach English language. They sent a Marathi medium geography teacher to teach English math. And to whom? Because they are the most, they are the end of the pyramid in society.
Unprivileged.
They are unprivileged. We filed PIL, we went to the court, but the state kept on giving affidavits and catering, and they couldn't see. By the time they passed out, the 10th standard students who were getting most affected didn't get proper teachers. After 5 years, now the policy is stopped. So now you have the right policy in place, but so many batches suffered because you didn't have the right teachers to the section of society who genuinely needed good teachers, who were being bold enough to work during the day and study during the night. So you have cases like this where students suffer due to an adult system which is probably faulty, or implementation is faulty, I would say.
That is so sad.
Yeah.
Because I think even the courage to think that I will do both, just that, like the thought of, no, I want to be, even though I'm a peon and I'm working as house help and I'm doing this and I'm a waiter, like you said, I'm working in a bar, I'm a sweeper, but in the night I do want to go and educate, I do want to upgrade my life. That courage is required, and then you're let down by a system, because the system is, like you said,
the implementation of system also, I would say,
Also, I would say the system doesn't care. Because if they cared enough, then that kind of power and thought process would be put into the implementation. Somewhere it's like, theek hai, ho gaya.
No, I think everything, is related to revenue. Now, why was this done? Probably the state wanted to manage their revenue better.
Yeah.
So they have to get certain policies. Everything at the end of the day is about the financial math, right? The system, even though, I mean, it's a good logic, right? That instead of using day teachers, I will use surplus teachers.
Correct.
But the implementation is done at the end of the day by human beings. People who sit in power, it's that person who can either do a good job and can do a poor job. If you implement laws properly, you will actually see the laws are very good, but the implementation is what can be faulty at times. So we need proper implementation rather than, I think, saying that the law is wrong. The law, in fact, actually always makes sense. It's the implementation that is poor.
You know, while you were talking, something came to mind about, I don't know if you've seen it, I'm sure you have, but when I was much younger, during college days, I would see lots of hoardings that said, come for classes for engineering, come for classes for pre med. And like, there are these massive tuition institutions that are running, and especially like I'm from Delhi, and in Delhi, I would see this hoarding like in every street. And,
Right.
you know, it would say post 12th, join instantly. And, you know, it's like that race to, if you want to be in engineering or medicine or law, any hardcore line which requires that much so you know these educational backing, and all these streams I would see have these massive institutions of I don't know, extra classes,
Yes.
tuitions or whatever, and they say we are the ones who are going to help you sit for the entrance. Do you see or have you seen any massive racket happen there that you've
Oh,
dealt with lawfully?
oh, absolutely. So if you see, there's so many films also made which, at the end of the day, films reflect your society, right? So like you said, there are these classes. They still are. Now you have classes for entrance examinations, like for medicine, for law, because for every professional course you have an entrance examination.
Correct.
If you don't pass and you don't get the right guidance and coaching, you are not going to fare well.
Yeah.
Even if you get good marks and you don't have the right guidance to fill the examination process and counseling online that I just explained, you are out of the admission process. So you need so much of hand holding. So wherever you can do good, you can also do bad. So you must have heard about the Vyapam case,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You have heard about these classes in Kota. In Maharashtra, there used to
Yeah.
be in Latur, where you have these massive institutions who give private coaching. The kind of pressure you have on kids to
Yeah.
perform by both parents and the institutions to do better, because everybody wants to get into a premium institutions.
Yeah.
So yes, I have dealt where um, either complaints are filed by the students that we've paid so and so money, and the coaching classes have just taken our money and fled.
They don't exist even.
They don't exist even. Or there would be cases where these institutions are doing very good job, but because you will have somebody come file complaints against a very good institutions to extort money from them, that see, if you don't otherwise you will have to, you know how extortion
Yeah.
typically is,
Will spoil your name.
they'll spoil your name and then are dragged in courts saying that you don't have infrastructure or you are doing particular things which are not right. So yeah, we see these cases all the time.
So, Pooja, let's talk about government bureaucracy and the cost of speaking up. Tell me, you work with government bodies like municipal corporation, customs, and excise. Can you share a moment where the system protected itself rather than the citizen?
So I would word this a little bit differently. So there are a lot of government officers which have the power to help, okay? But the scrutiny on themselves is so hard that even if they go and say, fine, we see that there is some problem here, but if I go out of my way and set it right, there are so many instances that these government officers are put under scrutiny. Oh, why did you go out of your way and correct this? So, more often than not, you have these good officers who will come and tell you, see, I understand that there is, you know, this system has either been wrong or there is some problem that you deserve right. You go to the court and you will get relief, but we cannot directly help you. So, you know, in especially matters like this, you realize that even government officers tend to protect themselves, and I can understand why. Imagine a government officers getting an inquiry and a blot on their career because they're trying to do good, because somebody has filed a complaint against them that, oh, there seems to be some suspicion that this person has gone against and, you know, help a student. Say, so suppose somebody, you take it as a student or take any person under the corporation or revenue intelligence, that there has been a procedural error. Okay, procedural errors, you can say, okay, we will give you another chance to correct it. Now, does everybody get that chance? No, it's a
No.
big country. The officer must have thought that, okay, it's a procedural error, let me give the person another chance. This officer can have an inquiry against him or her just because he went against his, and then he will have to face and be a blot on his service career. So
It's a huge risk.
this is a huge risk. And for what? For being a good citizen, right? If I want to give another example, so if you see that a particular government body is, say, weaker in a particular case, and you see in every case they have to file affidavits.
Yeah.
You will find the government body affidavits to be very vague, non-admitting to anything, like the language, the way they use. That our affidavit starts by saying that this cannot be taken as admission to anything. I do not admit any allegations. We will probably not file our affidavit saying that yes, this is the problem, right? Because the system needs to go on. If the system fails, ultimately the citizens also fail.
Correct.
So yeah, more often than not, the system gets protected and wants to be protected because the system needs to go on and, continue being of use.
What happens to an ordinary person who challenges a government authority without legal strategy? Tell me a case which explains this.
Okay, I'll tell you this. I'm going to give you two very interesting cases. There is one case when, you may be very aware individual and you realize that um, something you've been wronged by the system. So what you will keep visiting these offices. You will go end up meeting these offices and you will meet them or you will write letters to them. And you have not done anything. Little do you know that you've already passed the limitation of filing this case. So in spite of the fact that you were very aware, because you didn't have the proper legal strategy, you are barred by the law of limitation. We have something called as law of limitation in our country. So if you want to raise a dispute or a complaint, it has to be done in a particular time. So lack of legal strategy, no matter how aware you were,
There's nothing you can.
there's nothing you could do, right? I will give you another example. So there was this one individual, an activist, very, very concerned. He comes to us, we file a PIL saying that a particular ambulance, this is a very state-of-art ambulance, which was, there was a tender process by this one municipal corporation. Okay. Now the cost of this ambulance, even by the army, central government, is, say, for example, 10 rupees, right? But this corporation was buying it for 100 rupees. So this activist started writing letters that at the end of the day, this is lost to the state exchequer. So then he did, nothing happened. He wrote letters to everybody. Then he said, I'll file a PIL. Now there is this very interesting thing. The courts can make the activist pay a hefty sum of 5 crores just to show that you are a bona fide person who wants to file a case.
Huh?
Yeah. So if you were really a good activist, then you have to show your bona fides by depositing a sum of 5 crores in the
So-
court.
It's like pay money for a cause that you want to fight,
Yes.
just to prove that you actually want to fight it.
Yes.
That's crazy.
So but that is your settled law of the country today. This is what the system is. So in spite of this person who was a whistleblower, who had every account, he was being put to scrutiny saying that fine, if you are a bona fide person and if you are in fact not as a puppet of some other competitor, you pay 5 crores and show your bona fides. Now, activists will never come ahead and file cases when, because these activists are not somebody who come always from financially well-off backgrounds.
Correct.
So then this defeats the purpose of filing PILs and getting the truth out and approaching the judiciary. This is also a very hard truth.
Can you explain in a very basic language what a PIL is?
See, PIL means public interest litigation. By that, you mean any litigation where you may not be the direct recipient of such benefit, but this affects people at large. Any person can go to the court and say, let's see, this affects people at large. Something that should be implemented is not being implemented, or something that is not supposed to be done is being done, and you can directly come to the court and you don't have to wait for years together the way you have to wait in civil disputes. You get immediate hearings because this comes under the purview of writs or PILs. So when we say PIL, it's a public cause which is affected, you can directly go to the court. So our constitution is very good, it gives us these opportunities to correct the wrongs which can happen in our society.
And also can be done by any common man.
It can be done by any common man
Yeah.
to the extent you don't even need a lawyer. You can stand up in the court on your own, so long as you know the legal procedures and argue your own cases without a legal attorney.
Is there a silent punishment for citizens who file complaints or PILs?
So it is the same thing as I said, not silent punishments, but conditions like pay a huge amount in
Yeah, like you
crores,
said, yeah.
uh, is very taxing to a genuine
Yeah,
activist,
that's like a silent punishment.
right?
Yeah.
So who can pay something in such a big amount of crores? Somebody who's actually backed by a financial institution, right?
Correct.
Which activist who's genuine, comes from a background, will actually be able to pay this 5 crores? And not every PIL, mind you. I'm not saying that every PIL needs to pay an amount of 5 crores, but the court can ask you, that. So
Yeah.
a lot of activists, in fact, are getting dissuaded because litigation itself is very financially,
Draining.
physically, mentally draining.
Yeah.
Right? And on top of that, a huge financial liability of paying a particular amount in crores to show your bona fides, it gets pretty tough on activists.
So, Pooja, let's talk about commercial law, money, and moral blindness. These are, I think, very prevalent topics as far as law and our society are concerned. Can you recall a commercial dispute where legality was used to justify exploitation?
So if you want to know about commercial disputes, I'll give you a very good example. So when you see family disputes, and there is some property involved, and there is a dispute going on between one family member and another family member, more often than not, you see that one part of the family member is in a position of power, because either they will have the access to certain documents that other family members don't have, and therefore can have a leverage, saying that, oh, you don't know what is being left for you by your ancestors, and therefore there is a power dynamic. Or there could be that somebody has more resources to cater to legal resources than the others. So you will always find that there is exploitation in cases like this. Let me give you an example. There is something called as a Domestic Violence Act, which is, there for protecting women who can be abused
Yeah.
inside of their homes. Now, this act will guarantee you um, to have a roof over your head, one of the things, in your matrimonial home, in spite of the fact that there could be, problems, even if you have problems living with your in the family that you've married into. At the same time, there is another legislation which is called as the Senior Citizens Act, where senior citizens protected against children who do not want to look after
Their parents.
their parents and elderly. Now, see how both these acts are misused so much. You will now see a trend that certain parents will file cases against the daughter-in-law, not their own son, to oust her because there is a marital dispute or divorce proceedings happening between the husband and wife.
Oh.
Right? And then you will also see the Domestic Violence Act being misused, where the Domestic Violence Act can be used by one of the partners to make criminal cases against the family members.
Right.
Right? So though under one Domestic Violence Act, the woman has the right to stay in the matrimonial house, the Senior Citizen Act can evict somebody because they can allege that this person is harassing us. Right? Now,
Yeah.
this is something still going on up to the Supreme Court. In the latest verdict, what the Supreme Court has said, that you will have to see every case on its own merit and then decide. Senior Citizen Act also cannot be used as a weapon to oust the daughter-in-law, not the son, right? So you cannot use it as a weapon. In the same way, under the Domestic Violence Act, you cannot weaponize it either. So this is what, in commercial disputes, you can say one party getting exploited.
Wow. I just never thought that these would get intertwined, right? You don't think like that. Like you hear of domestic abuse cases and then you hear of the senior citizen thing, but I never knew that they're intertwined and like somebody can benefit from one or the other.
Yeah, so see, that's why lawyers are doing, because there's so many legislations that overlap.
But I'm glad that there's a law saying each case will be handled for its own merit because each case is unique and you don't know the intention behind each case.
Right.
So there can't be like one standard verdict given for all.
Yes. Yeah, one size fits all. Yes.
Yeah, it can't happen.
So the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, such a beautiful judgment to say that you cannot generalized situations of Senior Citizen Act or the Domestic Violence Act, and you will have to decide that if a senior citizen has a problem, will probably have problem both the son or the daughter and the spouse.
I know it'll sound a bit naive on my part, but do that many people actually not want to look after their elderly parents, grandparents, and actually throw them out? Is it quite common?
Yeah, now you've seen the trends. Now, a lot of times what happens is um, the society keeps changing, you see that the parents with love want to part with their property before
Passing.
before passing. So initially you would see a trend that people would make wills and go.
Correct.
Now wills are challenged every day.
So people feel rather do it while I'm living.
And if wills get challenged, nobody can enjoy the property because there will be disputes between siblings
And it'll go on forever.
and it goes on forever. So what does a parent think? That instead of leaving a will, let me gift the property today. And in so many cases, you see the minute the property is gifted, the children don't want to look after the parents because now the property has in the name of the child.
So it's
And
really sad.
what
to
a beautiful Senior Citizens Act is legislated, that in cases where the parent has already parted with the property, you can give it back. If the senior citizen files a complaint, the property will be reinstated
back.
to the senior citizen if the child is not looking after the parent.
So isn't it sad to see for you as a lawyer, like that many people are basically looking after parents just for the property, just for the will money or
Yeah.
whatever else is going to be left, inheritance.
Yeah.
I would not think that that would be the common mentality. I thought it'll be, you watch it in movies and you hear of one odd case and you think it must happen somewhere. But you would not think like it's that prevalent and that common that people are just waiting to get the money and inheritance and then otherwise be like, yeah, you can go now. Bye. I don't need you in my life.
So it doesn't happen in, so it's like now, for example, your divorce rate has become 30 to 40%, right, in the country. The senior citizen cases still is not that high, but significant enough that you have precedents up to the Supreme Court. So now you see trends. The law was legislated because there were enough number of cases where they saw that senior citizens are being exploited. But I mean, years to hoping that because of laws like this, the exploitation will stop.
Why doesn't the government actually pass a law about inheritance being divided between siblings? I mean, like you said, right? This has gone on for so many years and decades of sibling rivalry and, the will being disputed and parent passing away. And let's say whatever's left is fought over for years by the children and then the grandchildren. Why can't there be like certain laws implemented that this doesn't have to happen, like it doesn't have to be a legal battle after?
See, what happens is, like I said, every instrument uh, that you can use can be used in a good faith or it can be misused. So it is a very good way that there is a law that you can make an instrument. In fact, you can even do handwritten notes. Even oral wills are accepted in the country. Suppose you are in a place of peril and you probably think that you are not going to make it and you are not going to survive. You can even tell it to somebody that I wish that this be done off my property. Even those last words
Matter.
are taken as a will
Yeah.
and at their intention what to do with their property. Now, this can be used or misused. You
Correct.
cannot take away the right saying, if somebody has misused this, you should have the procedure to even challenge it. The problem is not the procedure. The problem is the inadvocacy of the legal infrastructure. Today, your pending cases are so much. Your legal infrastructure is so meager than the number of cases which are filed that you are not able to cater it. Suppose you had enough infrastructure and legal framework and appointment of judges, your cases would not be pending for that many years. So these cases would not go on forever. Your justice would have prevailed sooner. So I
Correct.
think the solution is that we need a very strong legal infrastructure in the country.
So, according to you, in the family law space, what is the most common clause people sign without understanding and like later regret deeply about it?
I'll give you a very simple example that we do every day. All of us have car insurances and medical insurances, and none of us even bother to read the fine print.
Yeah.
We directly sign, we pay the money, and then only when we really need these insurances are we made aware when our claim gets rejected. You know, there is something called as in the car insurance that if there was some incident where you've entered a no entry lane, your claim can be rejected.
No idea.
And no entry, the way in our corporation, the way it works, or in any corporation for that matter, no entry is changed by any time of the week and the day,
Correct.
right? And it is so difficult to prove because our road infrastructure is still under a lot of changes and
Yeah, yeah.
upgradation. The companies can reject your claim because we don't read. Even a medical insurance, when we sign, we don't see which surgeries and what treatments will be included. If we read the fine print, we can actually sit with the insurance company, say, please amend this claim for me. All they do is they will change your amount, maybe by a margin, and include that and give you a customized insurance. Now, this is a very, very basic mistake that we do, that had we only had the legal awareness, we would have done better.
Yeah, we blindly sign.
We blindly sign travel insurance, car insurance, medical insurance. These are the things that matter to the human, an average human being also, or somebody who's well off also. Everybody needs insurance, right? Any insurance you do, all of us, this is the most common mistake that I see in a day-to-day, or taking leave and license cases. We all have seen that most people, the agreement is made by the agent. Both the parties come, sign, don't look at it. And when one of the party refuses to leave, or the landlord refuses to give back the deposit, you will see these cases pending for years in the court. At some point, then they say, you know what, I would rather take a commercial loss than going for years and years to fight this.
Correct.
So it is so important to have legal set of eyes looking at the document that you sign. You will be protected. Very important in today's times that if you're signing any document, if I have to give one advice, please read.
Yeah,
If
I
you
don't
think-
think we take it that seriously.
Yes, yes.
We don't take fine print that seriously, and we're not even taught to. I think it's a lot to do with taught to, right? Even as kids, we were not told that when you sign a document, even you're going to university, right?
Yes.
You sign up a university residence.
Mhm.
There are so many forms you're signing blindly. Who's reading the fine print
Yes.
at the bottom? Nobody. You're
Yes.
signing, says yearly pay this much. Yes, agreed. Will be paid in 3 installments. Agreed. Sign, sign, sign. Every 3 months you get a reminder. You pay it. No one's reading. Because like I said, you're not taught. You're not told that,
Yes.
no parent says, beta, you make sure every document you sign, you better read it. Hey, it's not a practice. And it's
That's
never
true.
passed on. It's not passed on in families. You're not taught by your
Absolutely. right.
elders or your teachers or whoever that you must read every document before signing. I actually have a personal story that if I can share with you, where I signed a document without actually reading the fine print, and I sent it to a lawyer friend saying, can you read it for me? I was getting into a contract with a publishing house. And I said, hey, can you have a look at it? It's like 30 pages and I don't understand half the words that are written. Just let me know what it means. And she writes back. She sends me back the 30-page document with like lots of red lines, okay? And says question mark, question mark. And she's made notes on it and says, this publishing house is in the UK. And if you are publishing with them, you may benefit. But if things were to go southways, there is no way you can fight this. And I said, what could go wrong? And then I looked on the internet and I said, everything looks good. I went ahead with the publishing house, despite my lawyer friend giving me all the red marks on the contract. And would you believe, not only did I lose money, I lost rights on my book.
Yes.
So it is a personal experience where I
Yes.
feel like, yes, documentation, lawyer, reading, all of that is required if you're going
Yes.
into any legal binding with anybody.
No, I think, like they say, write an SMS like it could be read in a court one day. I really believe this. If you're writing to anybody, writing anything to anybody has consequences. If you're going to sign anything, my advice, please read. Fine print, larger print, please read. Take help. We are in day and age where we have resources today.
Yeah.
And it doesn't hurt, by somebody just vetting your document, because this will have real consequences.
Yeah.
So there you
Yeah.
have it,
I
Legal
absolutely
awareness.
agree. And this is obviously going back 6 years. Back then there was no AI, but now it's like you upload the document even into AI and you say, hey, can you check this legally for me if it works for me? I'm just saying if somebody doesn't have the money and resources to have a lawyer, like I had a friend, somebody doesn't
Right.
even have that. It is
Right.
as simple as just upload it, and if it
Yes.
warns you and says this is not going to work out in your favor, then you can actually, look for legal action or legal help. So I just feel
That's
like
right.
it's a matter of like taking action
Yes.
and a matter of being aware. I
Yes.
completely agree. Have you seen businesses misusing or weaponizing delays, paperwork, exhaustion to force settlements?
I think you see a lot of this, and especially in a city of Bombay where you have such rampant infrastructure projects that are going on. And more often than not, you read in newspapers that particular project stopped midway, people have invested in it, people
Yeah,
have bought homes, and it is nowhere. These people are stranded, these people are exploited. And more often than not, you will see a builder, he started a particular project and has not delivered the promise. As a result, you will have people from their own hard earned money, from whatever financial background they belong from, are stranded out of something as basic as a home. So either you will not get what you were promised, or in certain cases, you will have one property that you will be sold to four different people.
one home.
One apartment is sold to four different people, and you will find the builder is either absconding or is has the resources to file so many cases that you would end up forcing these people to come out for a settlement. You would rather want to say that, what, I would take a loss than washing my hands of the property,
Correct.
right? That is why you had something called as the RERA Act, the Real Estate Development Act, to protect people like this, because this started happening so rampant. So I'm going to give you two examples. I have this one case, and it's one of the biggest builders in the city. Um, Somebody who has all the resources had one of the massive projects in Bombay as we speak today, and this is on a land which belonged to particular people who are the original people living there. So under the law, you are supposed to first give them homes, rehabilitate them, and the rest of the component you can sort of exploit it financially by selling it. Now, the most exploited class is this, where you're rehabilitating them. Now, this builder gave on paper, I mean, it is all black and white. When you measure their area, every flat is smaller. In spite of the fact that you are selling the sale components probably 10 to 20 times bigger than that rehabilitation flat. But these people come from middle class to lower middle class homes. Their size of homes is 350 square feet, okay, which is, and even in that 350 square feet, you have given lesser than what you promised.
Yeah.
And because these people don't have the money to find that kind of litigation, and you will see on the other hand that you will have construction companies and redevelopment companies, real estate companies, who will have all the legal infrastructure in house or that they can employ, who will continue and can push the legal process in such a way that you will find these people at the end of the day rather choose to settle for a lesser amount than what they deserve.
So in the end, did they get justice or did the builder win because of his resources?
The case is still pending for the last 10 years.
And probably for a long time.
Well, now they're thinking of settling, like you said. So you can use the system in a way that you can prolong it. And the more you prolong, people would want to settle it.
Correct. They think itna time bacha hai, se acha.
Yes.
Take the money. Who's going to wait forever?
Who's going to wait for you? You're absolutely right. I'll tell you another case. There is this one particular builder who has sold this particular flat to two different people. And this flat was not even supposed to be sold. It was supposed to be given to the government. Because, if government gives you, say, extra FSI, that is extra area to build, it will say, fine, we will give you extra FSI. You please give and construct certain flats which the government can use for its, policy for giving it to the, for the people, for basically subsidized society where people need subsidies. So for lower income groups or for some protected groups. The flats that he was supposed to give it to the government, he has sold to two different purchasers.
So he sold an illusion.
He has sold an illusion. And now the fight is happening between two people who
And
have paid full money to the builder, which the government is also fighting to claim this flat. So these things keep on going on. You will see this every other day in every other projects.
but tell me, how do two people end up buying the same apartment? Obviously, like let's say there's this apartment, right? Right now, this is an apartment. You come and buy it, and I come and buy it, and there's no way you and I know each other, and we'll know that we both have bought the same place. But like, I don't know, the documentation or some protection in that sense to the consumer, no?
No, so I'll tell you what happens is, suppose you have approached a particular builder and you're interested in buying a particular property. You will enter into an agreement for sale. So where you say, okay, I am paying you 50% of the amount or 30% of the amount, whatever agreed. You pay that money. Even if you register that document, that is not a sale deed. That is only agreement for sale, right?
Correct.
It is the entire property is not yet been transferred to the person,
Correct.
but a significant amount of money has already been
Taken.
decided.
Yeah.
Now what happens? Meanwhile, probably in that area, the property prices have increased. Now the builder gets greedy. He says, I have already locked down the terms. I was going to sell this person this flat for probably 10 lakh rupees. Now the property area in the property rates in that area has probably gone up to 25 lakhs. So what he does, he will either start threatening this person that you give me 25 lakhs, and he says, hello, it's all black and white and I'm not going to do it.
It's on paper.
It's on paper. This person quietly will go sell this house for somebody for say a 22 lakhs to another purchaser, right? And will do a sale deed. The document for property to show that you've bought something ultimately is the sale deed. So even though you have a sale deed, this flat was already created right in somebody else's favor. So rights are created in favor of two different people. And little do you know, it is not even supposed to be sold to begin with. And you will find these type of cases happening so rampant that the government had to actually come and have a law to protect these people. But we are still dealing with a lot of issues in this sector.
So, another area of law that I would like to discuss with you is taxes. Can you tell me, why does taxation law induce more fear than criminal law in the common people?
I completely disagree. I think our taxation authority are very toothless compared to the authority which can wield power. For example, let me simplify this. A constable in a police force has far more power than an income tax commissioner.
Really?
Yes, because look at this. Police authorities have so much of power to maintain law and order, to take action against anybody who can be suspicious. You can, immediately put the law in motion and immediately take action. Police authorities actually have that kind of power. Somebody as the entry post in the police authorities is that of a constable, a havildar. That person will have an income tax commissioner, will have to follow all the protocols just to show that their tax was evaded. So absolutely there is no fear in the common public of taxation as much as they have of the criminal proceedings in the country, where your personal liberty is at stake. That immediately law can be put in motion and you could be facing criminal charges against you. The only exception now you see is the Money Laundering Act, where you have both financial consequences and personal liberty, which is that all your assets are frozen and you are behind the bars and you will be arrested.
So this word money laundering, right? I think most of us, the common man, learns about it through movies and shows. We don't actually know what legally happens to get to that point that you're known as a money launderer. Obviously, it is you're moving money illegally or you're washing cash into white money, right? This is my basic understanding.
Right.
Can you explain a little bit more in detail in what happens and how these money laundering cases, become bigger and bigger over time, and let's say they go unnoticed till they actually become like this big ticking bomb?
So I think the act has been here for many years in the country. Though you see cases which are now being rampantly filed, it basically means, say, that if you're going to avoid taxation and you move your money from ways just to ensure that you are not going to pay your taxes, you will come under the scanner, of the Enforcement Directorate under the legislation which is called as Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Now, under this act, you have the power, the authorities will have the power not only to arrest you, that is, your personal liberty will be at stake, but also freezing of your assets. To an extent, the law is so severe that if anybody gets paid, and I mean, of course, there are parameters for that if somebody gets paid through the proceeds of this crime, even their account can be freezed if you're under the suspicion. So, if suppose I have paid somebody, but if I come under the area of suspicion, then even in spite of the fact that I had nothing to do with the scam, even my assets will be frozen.
Oh,
Yes.
so just being in contact in some way.
In the way that it could look suspicious.
Right. Okay.
You know, it could be like
You could look involved in some way.
I could look involved in some way. Then even my assets, in spite of doing anything, will get frozen.
So, can you share a case where somebody was technically compliant but still harassed or pressured?
So, you know, in so many cases that you'll see that somebody has been arrested in a case of fraud or in a case of financial scams that we see these days, are kept behind bars for 2 years, 3 years. And then you'll realize after they are released, they fight a legal battle. And at the end of the day, the verdict is out that you are exonerated. So in every case where you are exonerated of the charges, it basically means you were technically compliant, but you were under the suspicion and you had to go through the entire ordeal of freezing your assets, being under bars for that many years. And what was the outcome? That today you are exonerated, but yes, you are exonerated after spending so much time in legal battle and spending so many times behind the bar. So you have so many cases, especially these days, that you will see. Either you could be a politician, you could be an industrialist, you could be anybody who is working with financial institutions. And you have seen so many examples where you've got exonerated because you are technically compliant, but too bad you had to be arrested for 3 years and your assets had to be frozen for that many years.
I don't know, you're stripped of your own, pride as well
Yes.
and place in the society,
Yes.
because not everyone can bounce back. Not everyone has the mental strength also to be like, okay, I'm finally exonerated after 6 years, but those 6 years changed me, drained me, made me rethink life.
Yes. It is very hard on these families.
Yeah, exactly.
And more than the person who's arrested, if you see the social circle of this person, their family members, their spouses, their children, and as lawyers, we end up catering in, we end up counseling the family members because we see such a broken family who has to go through this ordeal.
Yeah.
You see a family member who has been arrested for these financial crimes. You see that they can't even do something as basic as pay their medical bills or pay their education bills of their children because their assets are frozen. Imagine the plight of this family, only to know a few years down the line, you will be exonerated and saying that, oh, you were technically compliant, but you had to go through this ordeal. It is very heartbreaking.
Absolutely. And what is the psychological advantage this system has over individual when it comes to tax enforcement?
See, government has endless resources to fight the legal battle, to go in appeals, right? An individual may not match that. It is very difficult for an individual to match the same amount of rigor, the financial rigor, the mental rigor that a government body can. It has endless resources where it can support a legal battle that an individual probably may not.
Yeah.
So that is always the advantage that a government body will enjoy.
So tell me the real human cost of law. After years in courtrooms, what pattern do you see in human behavior when fear enters the room, when they're accused of something, even if they've done something wrong or they haven't?
So, I have seen fear enter the courtroom. You'll have three different type of people where you see when there are controversies involved. More often than not, you see that your litigants are under some sort of fear, where you would know that one of the side could be more influential, or like we realize that how certain sectors who have the resources and have the money for these resources will end up sort of arm twist people who don't have. So you will often see where people don't want to come and assert their rights because they're afraid, or if they filed a particular case and then they want to sort of withdraw their cases because they really feel pressurized and overwhelmed because particular parties have more resources and more clout than them.
Then,
So that is one aspect. Second aspect that you will find in advocates. So you will find that advocates also sometimes come under fear because of the consequences of the case as such. And we are not robots. At the end of the day, we are human beings too, right? A particular case could be under so much scanner that we are also answerable ultimately, that we know if you are a family man, we have our families to protect. Law is equal for all. By that I mean that everybody, even if you are accused of the most heinous crimes, you cannot take away your right to defend your own case. Now, you will need an advocate at some point to defend, any accused.
Yeah.
And as my ethics, I have to first cater to my client, whether he has committed it or has not committed this crime. At least the law of this country will guarantee that he can have a right to defend herself or himself. But when we go back, the society may not be so kind towards people who defend. So sometimes in situations like this, you do see that lawyers also feel the pressure when they, represent particular clients for just to give them a legal defense that they deserve. Sometimes you see that fear enters the courtroom and also affects the judges. So, and you will see this in most cases of media trials, right? So you will see that there are cases which are completely followed by the media. You will see that media is hearing every word in the courtroom.
And then giving its verdict also.
And giving its verdict. This really hampers the justice. It really hampers. Imagine a judge, and imagine us as lawyers. So when we are arguing a particular case, we are always observing the judge. We are trying to understand how the mind of the judge works, what he's supporting, what he's against, because the judges are very perceptive and also expressive. If I know the judge is expressive, I know what's going on in his mind, and if I have a legal argument to counter it, I can give it. But the minute media trial starts, some sort of controversy has added to the pressure of the case, you will see the judges completely go inexpressive. They don't show what they're actually thinking, and it's very difficult to fight cases where we don't get much from the bench.
It becomes one-sided voice.
No, it becomes a monologue.
Yeah, that's what, one-sided voice.
It's such a monologue that I don't know where the mind of the judge is at. And therefore, we should sort of, I always say this, that, the media trials are really negative for good verdicts. Media should not be quoting every opinion of the judge, because the opinion of the judge is the opinion of the judge on that date. It is not the verdict.
Correct.
Right?
And also media gives verdicts based on what the public thinks.
Yes.
And then that can influence how the lawyer, moves forward, or the judge moves forward, or the courtroom moves forward. All those dynamics can change. It becomes a variable then.
So it's a very, very famous case. We are even taught in our law schools that initially our legal system, the civil legal system, was like in the West. Like we had a jury, right? And the jury would decide based on the evidence whether this person committed the crime or did not commit the crime, or in civil disputes as well. So we had a very famous case called as the Nanavati case. So like you've seen even the movie where you have that a spouse, that this man ended up killing his spouse because he suspected of her having an extramarital affair. Now, if you read this case, the verdict of the jury actually gave him not guilty judgment. Okay? And it was only after this judgment that, and at that time we were under the British rule, that they stopped the jury system, because they really believed that we as Indians are not able to look at the evidence of the case, but more the emotion of the case.
I completely get that.
So, like when you say these media trials and opinion of people is not necessarily based on the facts of the case, but more on emotions.
Yeah, it's emotional understanding.
And which is why your trials today are decided by somebody who is a legal expert and legal illuminary who is trained in that field, rather than fact-finding by the jury.
And I completely agree, because jury also, I see another side to it. They are driven by their own conditioning and experiences, and something may seem totally okay to them, which is actually legally wrong because
Yes.
their conditioning and experiences in life has taught them like
Yes.
this is okay.
Yes.
So they'll say yes to it.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's dangerous, right?
Yes,
Like
it
12
is.
human beings who are ruled by their own emotions and whatever. They don't have legal knowledge as such. They're coming
Yes.
giving a verdict to a criminal,
Yes.
which may go, southwards or better for them,
Yes. Yes.
but not based on any facts, just
Yes.
emotion.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's very dangerous. So what's the one moment in your career that stayed with you long after the case ended? Tell us something that has made you, that aha moment, like, yes, I'm a lawyer and this is why I'm a lawyer.
So I cater to a lot of students who belong to the PWD category. And let me explain this. Students who suffer with some sort of disability. It could be a physical disability, it could be a mental disability, it could be an intellectual disability, right? It could be congenital, or it is something that you have suffered due to an accident or a disease. Now, the law of our country will give special privileges for these students. A few years ago, our procedures to ensure that these students or these people who are seeking employment were put under such scrutiny, which ended up actually exploiting them or putting them under more hardships. I'll give you a case. There was this one student whose leg was amputated in a accident. There was a boy who was sitting in a garden, and there was a big truck which collided onto the garden, and this boy came under the truck, and his leg
Okay.
had to be amputated. He was somebody who wanted to be an aspirant for the army, but because he went to this ordeal, he made a mission of his life that he wants to be a doctor. So he enrolls in it, and as per the Persons with Disability Act, this person will get certain privileges for being under this category, because life is very hard for people with disabilities.
Correct. It's the
So,
benefits you take,
it's
correct?
a benefits you take. So every student, to show that he's disabled, needs to have a disability certificate. Over and above that, when you go to take admission, there will be another medical board which will see whether you're genuinely disabled or not.
Correct.
These students were made to crawl. They were made to squat on the floor to see how disabled you are and whether you are fit to be a doctor. We fought 7 to 10 years. Ultimately, the law changed by the central government, where these procedures of examine physically had to be set aside. There's a very good judgment of the Bombay High Court which says that you are going to be a doctor. You don't need to squat. You don't need to crawl. You need to examine this person to see whether this person can do the job, the physical job of being a doctor.
Yeah, the skill set for
The
doctors,
skill
not
set
the, yeah.
is not crawling and squatting and to see this person is not going to join the army, right?
Correct.
This person
The skill set required to be a doctor is there or not?
is there or not? But we had to fight a very rigorous battle to ensure. So this case made, I have filed in my career more than 100 cases, and I continue to do for people with disabilities, different disabilities, where they face so many challenges. And we have to knock the doors of the court just to ensure that they get employment or they get education in spite of the disabilities and difficulties they face in life. So this sort of really stayed, and when my clients or my students or these employees, they come back, they share their happinesses when they're getting married, when they get a better job, and they keep you in their hearts, and they always sort of, they always stay connected with you even way beyond the case. So, these sort of moments, really think that you've made a difference in society for the better.
Yeah, that's a huge milestone for achievement, especially to getting the central government to change an entire policies. I would say that's amazing. Kudos to you. Thank you, Pooja. I think this has been a really interesting conversation, a very educational one, and I hope people can learn the basics of law like I did today.
It was great to be here. I think it was very nice. You made me feel very warm and always here to give any sort of awareness where it benefits people. Hi, I'm Pooja Thorat. I'm a practicing advocate in High Court and Supreme Court. If you want to avoid common legal traps and be more legally aware, please watch this conversation on Human Thread on all streaming platforms.